let us be aware that while they preach the supremacy of the state, declare its omnipotence over individual man, and predict its eventual domination of all peoples on the earth, they are the focus of evil in the modern world.
We're all living in America, America.
We will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail.
Gentlemen, this is Democracy Manifest.
America will find you, and we will bring you to justice.
We came, we saw, we died.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is, it's technically September 12th, 2023 today, but this will be the September 11th, the 9/11th anniversary episode, a special and extravaganza, if you will. This will be the 33rd episode of Let's Talk About America. I would like to go ahead and apologize that last week I simply did not upload a video. That was my fault. Technically, that was the fault of global warming and the beautiful weather that I had to deal with. So I found it necessary to go to the beach every day instead of sweat inside of my non-air conditioned flat in Europe, because for some reason Europeans do not believe in air conditioning. It is one thing that they have yet to steal from America. Concept of cooling your home when needed. Don't know why, don't ask me. I am not a scientist. But anyways, it was either sit inside and sweat my dick off or go lay out on the beach for the past week. I chose the latter. So anyway, I'm catching up. This is going to be the 9/11, September 11th anniversary episode. I would like to take a moment and thank every person that comes back and watches every week. It means so much to me. It keeps me inspired to come back and talk bullshit every week. If you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel. Maybe share it with your friends and family or your foes. In memory now of 9/11, please share this episode with any firefighters, hijackers, Muslims, or racist that you may know in your own personal lives. I would like that all aspects of humanity get to indulge in my words and my wisdom, how rare it may be. I'm going to start off this episode with a new thing I'm going to do. Every week I'm going to say 3 things that have been not sitting well with me. 3 things that I've noticed that I've realized I don't like, and I hope that by voicing it into the universe that I can change it. Also, it's hot as shit. Like I said, no air conditioning, so I just have to sit here and sweat. That sucks. But the 3 things that suck. All right. First off, I don't like European black dudes saying the N-word. Okay? I don't think that should be allowed. I don't know when like the black Illuminati got together, Jay-Z, Kanye, all these guys. I don't know when they got together and decided that they were going to let European black dudes start saying the N-word, but I don't like it. If it makes me feel uncomfortable, I feel like that's a very low bar and that they should not be allowed to say it. I think I should be able to say it before like a guy like a French black guy. He should not be allowed to say that. So that's number 1 on my list this week. I've heard it a lot for some reason. Maybe I'm just attuned to it, but this week I've heard a lot of random European black dudes running around dropping M-bombs. I'm not a fan. Doesn't feel right. Second, these young like college dudes who walk around wearing pearl necklaces, stop. All right, stop. I don't know who is this, like something the Jonas Brothers came out with? Like who invented this style? Whoever came up with this craze, it needs to stop. The only people that should be wearing pearl necklaces are women above their 50s, and Wilma Flintstone. Right? Nobody else. If I see a dude wearing a pearl necklace, I don't care if you're a mumble rapper or a 20-year-old, white kid from France in university. I don't care. It's all the same. Stop. You look retarded. It's pretty gay, and not in the good way, not in the ooh, he's very forward way, in like the stop type of way. Stop doing it. I don't like that. Third thing, Asians wearing clothes with English phrases that read like they have a speech impediment. All right, now I know it's like a common trope that, dudes will get a Chinese tattoo or something and it'll say something wildly different than what they imagined whenever they actually got it tattooed. But it is becoming far too common where I see Asians walking around wearing like American flag t-shirts that will say something that is wildly inappropriate. I saw one old Chinese lady, and this woman, as she was Chinese, I don't know, she could have been 52 or she could have been 152. I'm not exactly sure. Your guess is as good as mine, but she was wearing a shirt with 2 American flags crossed over with the Great Wall of China, and it said deport illegals. It had the Great Wall of China with American flags, and it said deport illegals. I don't think she knew what that said. I think she just saw the Great Wall and was like, hey, awesome. I think she saw the American flags and was like, unity, friendship. But we need to have standards on what can be worn by non-native speakers on their clothing, because as funny as it may be, I think it's going to start to cause some problems. That said, those are my 3 things for this week. So thank you for getting that far. I would like to take a moment of silence, of sweet, somber silence, and just remember all the bad things that have happened in response to 9/11. I'd like to also, if you want, take a moment to remember the people who died that tragic day, September 11th, 2001. But also let's take a moment to remember the millions who died afterwards in response to it. So, there you go. That's the moment. Thank you very much for your entertaining that sweet, somber moment. I think that 9/11 was a drastic moment, not only in a generational sense, but an American sense overall, but also in a worldwide sense, where the world changed immediately that day. America changed immediately that day, obviously. Generation was scarred. Me, like many of you who will be watching this, we were probably in school that day. Some of us, if you're older, were at work. But that was a day when everyone was watching the exact same thing happening at the exact same time, because we all watched it live. That was the first ever moment where I think the entire nation came together and united in a moment of chaos, absolute chaos. No one knew what was happening. No one knew what was gonna happen. I think everyone was on edge. There was seemingly like a week during and after where it seemed like America had no other issues to attend to than that day. Like, it was all recovery from that day. And now we are 22 years on, and most people, I think, went on with their lives, maybe, for a year or two. You thought about it. We had memorials every couple of years at school. I'm sure some businesses would let their workers off, so maybe people, it was in the back of their minds, 9/11's coming up. But it's 22 years on. It's more than a decade on, 2 decades on, sorry. And it seems like that there are there's now a whole generation that is very vocal and out there on social media that we have to attend to every day that was not even alive. You know, there are 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds, 25-year-olds that were children, little small children that have no recollection of that day, have no memory of that day. And this serves to prove a point that whether or not you believe some sort of official story about 9/11, or whether you believe that there was some ulterior happenings going on that day, whatever your stance is, you cannot ignore the fact that that was a very traumatic day for everyone in America. And again, like I said, people around the world, because even other countries, other nations, you know, they saw that day that the dragon could bleed, in a sense, that there was weakness in the great monster. But anyone alive that day, anyone conscious and aware that day, that was a traumatic experience. And it is something that entire generations have bonded through together. It's called mass psychological trauma. And it's something where entire generations were bonded. So we will all remember that. We will all have sort of the same understanding of that day, the events that day, but never quite agreeing at the end of it. But now there's this new generation, and I'll call them, I don't know, like people 26 and under. You know, if you were 5 when it happened, you don't really remember how impactful it was into the social conscience. But there's this new generation, 25 and under, and they don't have this this bond, this mass psychological trauma that we all share. So I think that is in a way a good thing, because it separates them from something wholly unnecessary, something that, you know, might be mentally broken for a lot of people, but it also separates them culturally. So now we have to deal with how do we assimilate an entire culture that is so rapidly progressing, because it was also a difficult time where at the exact moment that America was going through the events of 9/11, that was also sort of the beginning of this new technological wave of development. So we saw immediately the internet just booming. We saw cell phones booming. We saw social media come a few years later with YouTube and Twitter and whatnot. But we have this generation that is not only culturally distanced from the rest of us, but also technologically distanced, and they grew up being amplified by both of these things. So not only were they distanced from us, but they had the ability to increase that distance daily, you know, exponentially, with the technology that they were being raised by. So to draw a parallel, you know, the people who went through World War II, the soldiers and the people back at home who had to support the war effort, you know, they shared in that cultural bond. And then the next generation, they weren't connected to it firsthand, but, you know, they were raised by the people who experienced it. They had to go through it. They were able to bond in a way and have sort of new age folk tales told about, you know, the Great War. So everybody had an uncle or a grandpa or somebody that fought in World War II. So it was still something that people were able to bond over, even if they were not directly there in that time period. And it was because they did not have the technology we have today to accelerate their distance culturally. So over the past 22 years, we've steadily seen, you know, the first year after, it was a massive thing. There were parades in every small town in America. There was the president, you know, was giving a speech every year for that we have to remember, that the war effort is in full swing, which I'm not even going to discuss today my extraordinary discontent with the repercussions of that day. But every year, it was very much in the mind come September, come fall, of what had happened in 2001. And we were never allowed to forget. And it was, it was twofold. We couldn't forget, but also it was not beneficial for any sort of powers that be to allow the populace to forget, because as long as we are constantly contained by that trauma, that mass trauma that we all shared, the easier it was to pass a lot of laws and legislation that now still seem to be sticking around 2 decades on. In the beginning, there were many people who were arguing against the Patriot Act, who were arguing against the War Efforts Act, that were arguing against both invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan. There were many people doing this, and I think a lot of very foresightful people, commentators, quite correctly said that these things will never go away. In a time of chaos, the last thing you want to do is to give power where power is undue. And we all saw this happen 3 years ago, and at the same time with the coronavirus, immediately, when chaos reigned, of course, the powers that be, the government, the people with something to gain, they said, well, let's use this as an opportunity to grant ourselves more overreaching power and more ability to constrain and restrict thought, speech, efforts by those who would want to be more independent of our rule. And it was no surprise to anybody who had made it through 9/11 and the war effort afterwards, but had recalled that information. Seemingly a lot of people did not recall that. But it's something that we should keep in mind. And that's the most important thing, because like I said, over time, those first couple of years, the ceremony every year on 9/11 was very prominent. It was almost necessary for any town, any city, any event, any of the Super Bowl, the World Series, whatever it was the whole pomposity of it was wrapped around 9/11, wrapped around the idea of freedom and American spirit, whatnot, who blah blah. But now over time, it's gotten to the point now where this is quite controversially the first year that a sitting president has not been to Ground Zero on 9/11 to give a speech. Now, I'm not saying that is a insightful act, a rhetorical attack by the Biden administration. I simply believe that President Biden is incapable of going to Ground Zero, going to the memorial site, and giving a speech. I think that this is a perfect example of don't ever attribute to malice what can, be rightfully reconciled with incompetence or stupidity. I truly think he's just incompetent, not able to carry out these duties. And it's not even a malicious intent behind why he was not there yesterday giving a speech. Because it's almost become a thing. I think every year we expect that on 9/11 there's some sort of president gives a speech, we remember the fallen people, the heroes and the flights and blah blah blah. We remember all the soldiers that died in vain and whatnot. But it's gotten to the point now where if even the people who were there, the generations, say President Biden's generation, my generation, my parents, your grandparents' generation, if even they are starting to forget and not consciously recall the events of that day, the easier it is going to be year after year for not only the official narrative of that day, which is still a very questionable narrative that many people argue about, but it will be easier and easier for that official narrative to take hold as historical fact. But it will also be easier for insane theories to take hold, and maybe one day overtake and become fact. So all these people that constantly complain and argue about alternative history and fake news and revisionist history, they should be the most prominent advocates of maintaining some connection with that day 22 years ago. Because the closer you can keep that day in mind, the more difficult it is for fantastical theories to take over and change what actually happened. But that does raise the question, what did happen? I think that's a very valid question. We don't know. If you believe the official narrative, then that's up to you. And this is not a. I don't even think trying to question 9/11 anymore is like so out of the realm of speech. Used to, that was like the biggest thing you could be. Like if you were a 9/11 truther. I remember when I was in high school, like I would get made fun of and picked on because I was quite vocally a 9/11 truther. And I think nowadays that's so tame in comparison to other things that you could say. And so it's not even controversial to question that. It's a conversation that can be had and quite frankly should be had. I mean, at the moment, what's his name? Vivek Ramaswamy, he's running for president, and he has been very vocal and clear that the official narrative that we were given was wrong and deceptive. So if even a presidential candidate can run with a platform with that included, then it obviously cannot be too disruptive to our cultural discussion anymore. But it is something that sparked off my interest in the world. I was 12, I believe, 11 maybe, 11 or 12 when it happened. I remember that day very clearly. Like many of you, I was at school. I was in first period with my aunt was the teacher. And all of a sudden, other teachers are just running into the classroom telling everybody, got to turn the TV on, and we got to pay attention to the news. And of course, no 11 and 12-year-olds are going to want to pay attention to the news. We're all hanging out in the back listening to Slipknot. And I'm pretty sure, I think that at that moment, when the second plane hit, that I was listening to Mudvayne on a CD player. I'm almost positive. But that was a day that unknowingly, well, obviously unknowingly, because it was not a personified event, but it created an inspiration in me to always question and be aware of what is happening and why things are happening. And trust me, it did not bode well for me at all. Oh God, it was the worst thing that could have possibly happened. I grew up in the deep South in very red and Republican areas, and I was adamantly 1000% anti-war, anti-invasion. Had multiple members of my family in the military, serving in Iraq, serving in Afghanistan at the time. And I was so vocally anti everything that George Bush and Dick Cheney could shove down our throats that I was getting suspended from school quite often. I was getting beat up by many people. I had lost friends and made friends during those times, which I'm very glad for, very happy for all the experiences that being a little social rebel brought me. But it inspired me to always look in other directions than where I'm told to look. And I've carried that on now. I still do. And I think that's a healthy perception to have. I guess I get shit from my friends all the time because they call me quite the contrarian, or they call me a conspiracy theorist, or they say that I don't listen to reason. I don't, obviously being in Europe and the Netherlands as a very southern sounding American during the time of Corona was not easy, especially with my outspoken ways. A lot of friends don't like to hear that nonsense, that talking back to what they want to believe. So as it is, September 11th, this is a time I think that should eventually go down as a some sort of public holiday. Not a holiday in the traditional sense of, American celebration. It's quite common in the Jewish religion that we like to not celebrate, but acknowledge some of the more somber periods. So many Jewish holidays are about bad things, about negative things, and it's a time of remorse. It's a time of acknowledging and hopefully overcoming negativity. So I think this September 11th should one day go down as a public holiday in America, and that it should be celebrated by the idea that don't always maintain your sense of individualism. Don't let the world come crashing into your front yard and change the way you think. Always keep an open arm to the people that you love, and always maintain your ideas and your ability to rationalize information as it comes to you, instead of allowing others to rationalize information to you. That would be a good Memoria as a holiday. Day of self-reflection. And that being, as what I normally think every year 9/11 comes around, I always use it as a day of self-reflection. And I also use it as a reason to tell my European bosses that I'm not going to work that day, because for all they know, I'm sitting at home crying. So that's always fun. That free day off. Awesome. That said, now that we got the sad stuff out of the way, football is back. Goddamn, I'm so happy. I'm gonna try to avoid using that 3-letter acronym that stands for the big football league that we all watch every Sunday, because I don't want them to take my video or my channel down. But the big football league is back, and it irritates me, because I know that, there's an old Roman poet named Juvenal, if you will, in the English, that said as long as you give the people their bread and their circus, that they will never revolt. And I know that football is simply not just football, baseball, soccer, basketball, whatever, sports in general, are simply just the circus that we as a society are fed to keep us placid. And I know this, and it frustrates me, but I'm so happy that football is back. I'm gonna enjoy it. It's one of the few things left in the world that I think brings multiple classes of people together in a somewhat cohesive way, which is sad because football is just a simulated war that we're doing to each other so that we don't actually go to war. If we didn't have that league of football, and each city did not have their team, each region did not have their team, we would go to war every few years. That's for damn sure. But luckily, we're able to hire the strongest, the fastest, and some would say the darkest athletes that we can find and pay them handsomely to go to war for us, which there's a whole controversy around that. I don't want to dig into it. That's a little too far deep. But if you want to hear my opinion on that, you can subscribe to the Patreon channel, which I haven't set up yet, but I'm going to. But yeah, football is just a simulated war so that the individual regions of America can fight out their woes and fight against their adversaries. Could you imagine if Boston did not have I don't know. I don't want to say I don't know if I'm allowed to say the words. If Boston did not have their football team, and let's say New York did not have their football teams, or Philadelphia did not have their football teams, could you imagine how quickly these cities would just start invading each other and beating the shit out of each other on the regular all the time? Just knocking each other out. You would not be able to take the train from Philly to Boston without just getting beat to shit because of whatever hat or shirt you're wearing. But luckily, our teams are allowed to beat the shit out of each other for us, hopefully. So my idea is to sort of calm and sway all of the insanity and craziness that has befallen our great nation recently, that we need to expand our sports leagues. We need to double the amount of teams. We need to bring in more players. We need to have quotas that each team has to have a certain amount of players from a certain amount of districts so that every district is represented. I know this sounds a lot like what we used to call the Senate or the House of Representatives, colloquially Congress, but I think that'd be a great idea if we had a political Congress, and we had an athletic Congress, and if we had an artistic Congress as well. So like just rap battles between all the best rappers from Atlanta and all the best rappers from Chicago. Just rap battles. And that's how we solve, like, I don't know, what do they call it now? Beefs, whatever. I don't even know. I don't want to try to sound too cool, But we should start democratizing our athletics and our arts. I think that's a good idea. It's quite funny how different like the American circus, the American football is from European football, the European circus. Because America is we're founded on war. We were founded on fighting. We were a wild frontier people. We raped and pillaged our way from sea to shining sea. That's how we conquered the great nation we have now. So it makes sense that our respective sport is just a battleground, just a pure fight to the death battleground. We knock each other unconscious. We break each other's ribs. We break arms, poke eyes, and ankles are broken God bless Aaron Rodgers, but ankles are broken every day. So it makes sense that that's the type of sport that we have used to get out our frustrations. And in comparison, you have the European football, which is simply a theater, a theater, okay? In the old times, you know, in the fantastic French courts of yore, the royals, they would sit around and they would bring in some very athletic, again, the darkest athletic members of society that they could find, and they would say, perform for me, show me tricks, do backflips, whatever, show me things that I cannot do. And now, today, we have exactly the same thing with European football. It's a very simple, domesticated, agile theater. It's not so much a sport. There's no sport to it. There's no thinking. It's just running back and forth, and it's almost a dance. You know, it's almost a ballet of sorts. It's a way to keep the billionaires, the royalty, the upper class, the echelon of society that we will never touch. It's a way to keep them occupied and monopolized in their assets. It is a way to keep billionaires happy and gambling with each other over who can own the most teams. And as I said, in contrary, you have the American football where it's, let's go out there and try to murder each other on field in front of 100 million people every weekend. That makes perfect sense. If you can compare the two continents, it makes perfect sense why we would be that way. But as it stands, I'm very happy. I don't give a fuck about basketball. Baseball is just something I like to do in my spare time. But God damn it, football. I'm so happy it's back, and it will keep me occupied and placid until about February 9th or so. And then after that, I'm back on the warpath, and I will be very, very anarchist again. But until then, I hope everybody is happy. I hope everybody is nice to their neighbors, to their friends. I hope everybody gets through a sweet and cozy winter. And let's try to get through another year of this nonsense. That's all I got today. Thank you very much. And I'll see you next week with maybe a little bit more to talk about. Goodbye.
Let us be aware that while they preach the supremacy of the state, declare its omnipotence over individual man, and predict its eventual domination of all peoples on the earth, they are the focus of evil in the modern world.
We will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail.
Gentlemen, this is Democracy Manifest.
America will find you, and we will bring you to
We
justice.
came, we saw, he died.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.